All right. So what's your project ultimately about?
So we're working in these forests that have been logged twice. So the timber companies in the 1970s went in and chainsawed down all the big trees, and then again in like 2007 they went in and did it again. And so these forests, like walking in, they're quite trashy. They're noticeably different from the forest we're in now, which is a primary forest, an old growth forest, a pristine forest.
It's never been logged or anything.
It's never been logged. But even in these forests you get, as you can see over here, these sort of vines, and it's quite difficult to get through. And if you go into a twice logged forest like the ones we work in, it's like this but just magnified. It's really hard to just walk through the understory because it's just like loads of vines, understory plants, rattans, those like spiky brambly like plants.
Mm-hmm.
And so what a lot of research has done is shown that within those forests that have been overrun or infested with lianas like this, it can actually slow the regeneration of the forest. So say the big trees struggle to grow back up because they're being overtopped, they're not getting enough light, or they're being outcompeted, or sometimes they're even being strangled by these vines. So what our project is actually looking at is we're going to try and cut some of these vines at different intensities. So cut them maybe 50%, 0, and then 100%, and then a gradient in between, and sort of see what happens to the seedlings in the understory and the trees. Do they grow back up? Do they regenerate more quickly? At what speed do they recover? And then my part would be looking at what happens to the dung beetles, because obviously if you're going into a forest and you've got loads and loads of vines like this, it could be providing really important microhabitats, important environments for the dung beetles and other wildlife to live in. So what ultimately I'll be doing is looking at whether when you change the forest and cut down these vines, what's going to happen to the wildlife.
All right. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Like, so ultimately it's impact to wildlife due to the the logging.
It's ultimately is can we help the recovery of forests that have been trashed by logging?
Okay.
Because what happens after the logging is you just get this huge explosion of these exact vines.
Yeah.
And so can you help recover the forest by opening up the understory a little bit more? But what does that come at some sort of cost to wildlife by doing that? It might do it. In fact, one of the things that's been shown before is that when you cut loads of these vines, you get a decline in fruit-eating birds. And that's probably because these vines, you can't see them here at the moment, but they're actually a really important fruit source. And they're so dense, they provide these tangles that the birds can go and live inside. So applying this vine cutting with a machete, where you're removing all of this understory stuff, it could actually be quite harmful. You could be removing important areas for the wildlife. So that's an angle that we're also looking to explore a little bit.
So you have to like small area studies, see how it affects, and see monitor the results and see what's the best course of action.
Exactly.
To try and bring back forested areas.
Especially because this is actually this sort of vine cutting activity. So these vines, you go and you machete them. This is an activity that's actually increasingly looking to be occurring in Borneo. Even if it could be done by timber companies that wanted to go into their forests and speed up the recovery of their timber trees. In that case, it might be the norm that the vine cutting is really intensive, and so you end up getting rid of all these microhabitats. Or it could be done by companies that are looking to reduce climate change. So because these vines are slowing the recovery of the big hardwood trees, which are actually hugely important for sucking carbon out of the atmosphere, it could be the case that companies and market incentives or markets could pay for activities that help increase the amount of carbon stored in rainforests, and vine cutting could be one of those activities. So there's a lot of activity going on, there's a lot of things going on in this area, and we're looking to sort of do something hopefully politically important and see what happens. We're having a bit of trouble getting it all sorted logistically because we've had problems with collapsing bridges and the classic difficulties of actually planning something in an office versus coming to a jungle and actually getting things running and moving. But that's the objective, and I hope we'll be able to to stay true to that.
Awesome. Well, good luck and thank you.
Thank you as well.
And thank you for being out here and doing it. Thanks for the hanging out with the camera.
It's great coming out with you, man.
You too.